Hi everyone, and welcome to your free Ornament Girl tutorial. My name is Kennedy, and today I'll be showing you how to make the chili penguin ornament pattern. The chili pattern is a variation of our Gobble Gobble turkey ornament pattern, so if you want to see how to make a turkey to match your penguin, be sure to check that video out on our YouTube channel as well. Also, be sure to check the link below the video for your free printable supply list that we've included with your tutorial. A quick reminder before we get started, this pattern, along with all Ornament Girl patterns, is copyrighted and it's illegal to distribute it or teach it without our permission. If you have a friend you think would enjoy making this ornament pattern, be sure to send them the link to this free video tutorial. Let's go over the materials you'll need and then we can get started. In order to complete this pattern, you'll need a soft foam wedge, satin straight pins, fabric, yarn, a few embellishments, and a couple of tools. Make sure you check out the free printable supply list at the link below the video to get all of the correct quantities and measurements for your materials. Once all of your tools and materials are gathered, we can start making the chili ornament. We're going to begin by covering your foam with the color for the penguin's body. So with a 4.5 inch square of fabric number 1, lay this on your working surface with the pattern side facing away from you, and lay your wedge on that square so that the point is pointing upward toward one of the corners, and it's pretty much centered so that each of the corners you have an equal amount of fabric on each side. Now slide this off your working surface and flip it over. And you're going to very carefully smooth that fabric over the edge of the foam and pin it in place at the side. And when you're pinning into a wedge, anytime you're pinning near one of these corners on the foam, you want to be very careful that you are angling your pin in toward the center of the foam, because if you angle it outward toward a corner, it's really easy to pin all the way through and poke yourself on the other side. So just be very careful as you are pinning this fabric in place. Start by pinning all along one edge of the fabric on one side of the foam. And once one side is pinned in place, you're going to smooth the fabric over the other side and do the same. You want to pull it kind of tight so that it lays nice and smooth. And I find it's really helpful to tug on the bottom edge and put one pin at the bottom while you're working on this other side of fabric. So you can see when I tug that, it really smooths out those bumps across the face of the foam. So you want to keep it nice and smooth and add another pin line along the other side. And now do the same for the bottom. The bottom edge might take a few more pins to hold it smooth because you're tugging it around a curved edge. So just take your time and work with that and keep it nice and smooth as you pin it down into the side of the foam. And now to get nice finished corners at each point of your wedge, you're going to pinch both layers of fabric at the corner and fold it over to one side of the foam. And it doesn't matter which way you fold it. If folding one way helps it lay smoother, then you should fold it that way and pin. And remember to be very careful when you're pinning near the edge or the corner of your wedge-shaped foam, because you really don't want to poke yourself. You'll do the same up here at the top point, just pinching both layers of fabric, folding over and pinning. And now using your fabric scissors, you can carefully trim away the excess fabric extending beyond that pin line. And once that is all trimmed up, you're going to use your second square of fabric number 1 and repeat those exact same steps to cover the opposite side of the foam. Once both sides of your foam are covered, we can start adding the penguin's belly. Using your flexible tape measure, measure 1 1/4 inches up from the bottom center of the foam and you can just eyeball where the middle of that foam is, and you want to place a marker pin at the 1¼ inch mark. A marker pin is temporary, so you only need to push it in about halfway. And now with your square of fabric number 2, hold this with the pattern side facing away from you if you have one, and fold the top edge over by about 1/4 inch. You don't have to be exact about that, but just fold it down by about 1/4 inch and crease the fold. And now you're going to flip your ornament around. So we're putting the curved edge at the top and the point at the bottom, and you want to line your piece up so that at about the center of the piece is right at that center marker pin, and the folded edge is just touching the marker pin. And you can take that pin out and return it, just using it to hold down the edge of the fabric. And anytime you're pinning straight into the face of the foam, make sure you angle your pin, because your satin straight pins are a little bit longer than the foam is wide, so you don't want to come out the other side and poke yourself. Once you have that pin in at an angle holding that fabric in place, you're going to create a prism fold, folding the left side down to the right and the right side down to the left, creating this triangle shape. And I've got a little bit of folding happening under there, so I'm just going to adjust. And you want to make sure this is pretty much centered in the foam. And now to pin this in place, you're going to measure down along the angled edge of this new triangle you just formed, and you want to pin at the 1 1/8 inch mark. And remember to angle your pins so that you aren't poking yourself through the other side. And along both edges of this triangle, you want to pin at the 1 1/8 inch mark along the edges. And now when you turn your ornament back around so that the curved edge of your foam is at the bottom, right where we placed these 2 pins, you're going to fold your fabric downward, creating a straight line at the top, and that is creating the white shape of our penguin's belly. So you want to smooth that all the way down over the edge of the foam, and just like you did with the body, you're just going to use a pin line in the side of the foam here, about 1/4 inch from the edge, or you can just do it really right along the middle of that side. You're just going to smooth your fabric out and pin it all the way across the bottom. And once that is all pinned, you can trim off the extra fabric extending past that pin line. And now you're going to flip the ornament over and repeat those exact same steps on the opposite side to add the belly. On this video tutorial, we do have timestamps for each section of the ornament, so if you want to return back to the instructions for the beginning of the belly, you can do that. Flip your ornament over and repeat those exact same steps on the opposite side. Once the penguin's belly is added to both sides, we can start adding the wings. To give us some guidance on placing the wings, you're going to want to cut a strip of paper that's about 1/4 inch wide and the same length as the bottom curved edge of your wedge-shaped foam. And once you make sure that your paper is the length of the bottom curved edge of your foam, you're going to want to fold that strip in thirds so that you have 3 equal sections on that paper strip. And once you fold that in thirds, you can just mark the creases on the paper so that they're a little bit easier to see. Now you can pin this onto the bottom edge of your foam, right along the center there. And now this is just going to help give us some guidance for adding the wings. So up here at the edge of your ornament, you want to add a marker pin in line with those 2 dash marks on your paper. Right here along the edge, I'm just pushing these 2 pins in about halfway, and they're in line with those marker pins. And then right into the tip of the foam, you also want to place a marker pin pushed in about halfway right there at the top center. And now using your flexible tape measure, you are going to use the edge of the tape measure to make a diagonal line by just touching the edge against this top marker pin and this bottom right marker pin. And it'll be really helpful if you can have an inch mark, like I have my 8-inch mark lined up here with the edge of the foam. It doesn't matter which inch mark you use, it's just easier to have a whole number lined up with the edge of the foam there. Make sure you're following the angle between those two marker pins, and then place another marker pin an inch away from the edge of the foam. So right here at my 7-inch mark, 1 inch away from my 8-inch mark at the edge of the foam, I have that marker pin placed. And now you're going to do the same thing with the opposite side. So using that bottom left marker pin and the top marker pin to get the correct angle, you're then going to place a marker pin 1 inch away from the edge of the foam. Now we can add the fabric pieces for the wings. With a 2 by 3 inch rectangle, hold this horizontally with the pattern side facing away from you and fold the top edge over by about 1/4 inch and crease the fold. And now fold in half the opposite way and crease to find the center of the piece. Unfold and place a pin along that center crease right below the top folded edge. Now we're going to add this right at the point where one of our marker pins on the front of our foam sits. And if you want a pin right below the marker pin, you can do that. I'm going to actually pull my marker pin out, and it left a little hole here that I can see right where that marker pin was. Angling your pin, because you don't want to pin all the way through the foam, angling your pin right there at the same point where that marker pin was to add your wing. Now fold the left half of the fabric down toward the right and the right half of the fabric down toward the left, creating this triangle. And before we pin it, we're going to turn this prism fold into a pyramid fold by pinching this top layer of fabric and folding it back to the right to add a third narrow triangle to the center there. And I know that's kind of hard to see in my dark fabric, but I have a folded edge here, a narrow triangle at the center, and then another folded edge. And you want to swivel this wing on the pin so that you're angling it upward and just covering that top right corner of the belly piece. So you're going to angle that upward. This left folded edge is covering the corner of that fabric piece, and you're just going to fold the fabric over the edge of the foam and pin it in place. And you want to make sure you use at least one pin at the center to hold that narrow triangle in place, and a few pins to hold the entire piece. Now we can add the second wing. With another rectangle of fabric, hold it horizontally with the pattern side facing away from you. Fold the top edge over by about 1/4 inch. Fold in half and crease to find the center. Unfold and place a pin along that center crease just a hair below the top folded edge. Now at this other marker pin, we're going to remove that and replace it right away in the exact same spot, angling the pin from our piece. Fold the left side down to the right and the right side down to the left, and now fold that top layer back over to the right, creating a narrow triangle in the center. Swivel that wing upward so that it's symmetrical with the wing on the other side, and so that you're covering that top point of the belly piece of fabric. Now pin it in place along the side. And trim any excess fabric extending beyond the pins. Go ahead and remove the marker pins, but leave that strip of paper, because now you're going to flip the ornament over and repeat those exact same steps on the opposite side to add the wings in the exact same way. Once the wings are added to both sides of the ornament, you can remove all of the marker pins and you can remove that bottom strip of paper because you don't need it anymore. Now we're going to add a band to go around the edge of your ornament and cover all of those raw edges and pins. With your long strip of fabric, hold this horizontally with the pattern side facing away from you and fold it in thirds lengthwise. You probably won't be able to fold and hold the entire piece at once, but that's okay. You can just work with the first few inches. And when you flip this over so that the raw edges are facing away from you, the width of the band should be about the width of the side of the foam to cover all of those raw edges and pins. And you're going to lay the beginning of the band right there near the tip of the ornament and use 2 pins to hold it in place. I know with this dark fabric it's kind of hard to see, but you're just laying it right on top of the fabric and pins at the edge of the ornament. And now, keeping your band folded in thirds as you go, you're just going to wrap this all the way around the edge of the ornament, covering up all of those raw edges and pins and giving it a nice finished look. And you want to pull kind of tight so that the band lays smoothly. And when you return to your starting point, you're just going to add a couple of pins. Up here at the top, you want to pin at the top so that the penguin's hat will cover it when we add that. And then once you pin it, you can trim off the excess fabric. Now we can add Chili's hat. To start the hat, you'll need a cardboard tube such as an empty paper towel roll. Mine is short because I've already cut it a few times to make a couple of different hats here. We're going to cut off 1/2 inch of the tube here. So I'm just going to measure and make a little mark at the 1/2 inch point so I know right where that is. And then using your scissors, you can just cut off 1/2 inch of that tube, and if it gets smashed and gets these folds, that's okay. Once you have a 1/2 inch strip, you're going to cut this so that you can unroll it. And now you want to trim this down so that it's 4 inches long. We need to make the hat a little bit smaller than just the circumference of the paper towel roll as it comes because it needs to fit on top of our chili ornament. So we're just trimming that down to be 4 inches long and 1/2 inch wide. And now you're going to close this circle back up, and it should be about 1 1/8 inch in diameter. So running across the center of this circle should be about 1 1/8 inch. And when you have it the right size, you're just going to add a piece of tape to hold that in place. So we just made our circle a little bit smaller because if we just used the tube in the size it came, it would be too big for our ornament. You can set this aside for a moment. And now we're going to add our yarn. If you haven't already cut your yarn pieces, I want to show you an easy way to get lots of pieces of the same size. You need quite a few 12-inch pieces of yarn. The amount that you'll need will vary based on how thick your yarn is. But instead of individually measuring out and cutting 12-inch pieces of yarn one by one, you can get something that's about 6 inches long. I just have this paper notepad. It's about 6 inches long. And you just want to wrap the yarn around so that when we cut this, the 6 inches on both sides will create a 12-inch piece of yarn. So that makes it a lot easier than measuring out a bunch of individual 12-inch pieces of yarn. But I'm just going to wrap this until I have about 25 or 30 wraps. Once you have about 25 wraps, you can cut that yarn. And now we're going to cut at the bottom here to turn these into strips instead of one long continuous loop. Once you cut in half at the bottom, these now all become 12-inch strips of yarn. And you can just lay those out. And that was way quicker than measuring out 12 inches one at a time. And now I'll show you how to add these to your hat brim. This ring that we made is going to make up the brim of our hat. So you want to take one of your pieces of yarn and fold it in half. put that looped end through the circle of cardboard that we made, and then bring the ends of the yarn up, pull them through that loop. So I'm reaching through the loop here, pulling the two ends of the yarn through the loop, and then tightening it up. And when you do this, you should have the little bump from the loop on the outside at the top here. So you want to make sure you're being consistent each time. Fold that in half, put the loop through from bottom to top, reach through the loop and pull your ends upward. And you're going to do this all the way around that cardboard tube until it's completely covered with yarn. And you want to kind of push those together so that we make a nice thick hat without any cardboard gaps showing. And if you wanted to make a striped hat, you could do alternating colors of yarn. I'm going to do a solid one here, but on this chili penguin, you can see I did every other with a green and white piece of yarn to make a striped effect. Alrighty, I'm down to the point where I've just got one more loop left to add here, and you do want to make sure that you have at least one piece of string set aside for finishing off the hat. And again, you might use more or less pieces depending on how thick your yarn is, but you just want to make sure that ring is covered all the way around. And now for this step, you can take your time, but you want to very carefully pull the yarn through the center and out the other side. And you don't want to pull it so hard that you're flipping these little bumps or these little knots all the way up to the top. You just want to gently pull them through so that they're coming out the top of the hole and they're folded underneath that brim. So go ahead and do that all the way around. You want to make sure you have them all pulled through, all of those strands pulled all the way through. You don't want them looped or only folded halfway under. And you can sort of push those little bumps into the inside of the hat. Again, you're not pulling on them so hard that they're coming all the way around to the other side, but if you just sort of push them into the inside of the hat, that'll hide them a little. And once you have all of your pieces pulled through and smoothed out, you're going to use one more piece of yarn and lay it underneath all of your pieces and just very loosely tie that around the outside of the pieces. And now when you tie it and finish it off, you want it to be about 7/8 of an inch away from the brim of the hat. So you can just scooch that down so it's about 7/8 of an inch away. Make sure all of your inside pieces are nice and smooth. And then tighten up that knot. Make sure you tie it twice so that it stays in place. And then you can just smooth those pieces up to become part of the top. And now you can see your hat shape starting to form, but you just need to trim the top to make a little puff ball. So the way you're going to do that is just start trimming off these yarn pieces. And as you trim them down, you can make them as tall or as short as you want, but if you trim them pretty short, they'll start to blend together and make this puffball shape for the top of your hat. Once that is all trimmed up, you can add it to the top of your chili ornament. And if you sort of squish it down, it'll make that hat nice and fluffy and round. And now all we need to do to finish off your penguin is add a few embellishments. Also, if you want to secure the hat with some glue or glue dots, you can do that. Since my yarn was thick, my hat is pretty tight on there, so I don't need to worry about securing it. But once that hat is placed, that will help you decide where to place the face. So to add the beak to your ornament, you're just going to take your tiny square of fabric and fold it in half with the pattern side facing outward, and fold it diagonally so it makes this tiny little triangle shape. And you can decide where you want that to fall on your penguin. It can overlap the belly a little bit if you want. And when you pin it in place at the corners, you want to use your gold sequin pins and your little gold beads to hold that beak in place and add some embellishment. And remember, if your pins aren't short, you want to angle them a little so they don't poke through to the other side of the ornament. Once your beak is in place, you can add the googly eyes to your ornament. Mine are sticky on the back, they're little stickers, but if yours aren't, you can just use a little bit of glue or a glue dot to hold those googly eyes in place. And now all you need to do is add the feet. And to do that, you're going to add a gold pin with a bead down here to the bottom edge. You're going to line the middle bead up with the point of the wing and pin it down here along the edge, and then add a bead to each side. And then repeat that over here on the right, lining up your middle bead with the tip of the wing and adding one to each side for the foot. And now all you need to do to complete your penguin is flip it over and add those exact same embellishments on the opposite side. And once all of those embellishments are added, your chili penguin ornament is finished. Since it's on a wedge-shaped foam, it does stand on its own, and so it'll make an adorable tabletop ornament or shelf decoration all winter long. I hope you had a great time making this along with me, and I can't wait to see how your chili ornaments turn out. Thanks so much for watching.